thank you for inviting me. And, you know, before Jim created New Jersey Reentry Corporation, there were some programs in the state that had committed themselves to second chances and reentry. I remember in the 70s when I was working for the city of Newark, I remember the late Ray Bailey. I don't know if any of you know the late Ray Bailey, but he was with the American Friends, and they started a program called Second Chance Incorporated. I worked in Newark City Hall at the time. I befriended the people who were running that, and I got to know many of the people who were in the program. I got to know their life stories. I got to know their history. I got to know some of the traumatic things that they experienced since they were children. And I am a person that believes in justice. I saw a lot of people since then going forward. They didn't get justice all the time. And I remember meeting a young man. He had been a football player at a high school in Newark. He was raised primarily by his grandparents. And he got the opportunity to go to college out in Kansas. And he went out there, a kid from Newark going to Kansas. You know, that was a culture shock. He was in a car with some classmates. The car got stopped. There was cocaine in the car. He didn't possess the cocaine, but this was in the 1980s, early. And here he is from New Jersey, not from that Midwest. He was sentenced, a federal sentence, 10 years. Wow. 10 years. His grandparents couldn't even afford to fly to Kansas to be with him and to support him. And he had a public defender from Kansas. And the lawyer told him, just plead guilty. Yeah. Just plead guilty. You know, we don't have to explain it wasn't yours. Da, 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 da. He pled guilty and he ended up in a actually 11 for 10 years. I met him when he returned to New Jersey. His frustration was every door he knocked on, the door was closed. Because he was an ex of it. Yeah. He got so frustrated trying to get a job, a place to live, just people accepting him. I know that that is the pain of many people who are formerly incarcerated. People look at you like you are some anomaly, that you're not a human being. Yep. But you know what? There before the grace of God. Amen. I could have been an offender. I remember when I was a teenager, I hung out with really, you know, kind of a little difficult group. Yeah. And I remember my mother telling me I could not be friends with who was my best friend. Because my mother saw the road she was headed down. And my mother thought if I continued my friendship with her, I'd end up in the same place. I thought my world was going to end because I couldn't be friends. Let me tell you some of the things that she got me. Bank fraud, identity theft, drug possession. This was the trajectory of her life over the next several decades. So often when we're young, we don't have the ability to make the right choices, to be able to understand what's good for us and what is not good for us. But as everyone has said before me, there is always a second chance. And if you're really committed to changing your life, you can have a third chance. People are much more sensitive today to understanding the plight of those who have been incarcerated. How many of you knew the late street doctor?
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
I met street doctor when he first came home. I was working at Essex County at the time. And he was introduced to me by the late Donald Tucker.
Amen.
And he came to my office and he said, you know how I survived? He said, I used to count the Rice Krispies in the cereal box they gave us.
Wow.
He said, that's how I kept my sanity. Kept those little tiny Rice Krispies. And I befriended him, and I was a big supporter when he started the Street Warriors. There was a foundation that I was working with, a charitable foundation. You know them. And they supported the street doctor. They got him a van, they got him an office location, and he went out into the community and he helped people resurrect their minds. I met a gentleman the other day, the prodigal sons and daughters, and he told me about his work. So give New Jersey Reentry Court, in my opinion, while there were others out there through the years, you've done it through consistency and commitment. And I know Sam knows this. He knows how to blow up a phone. He knows how to blow up a phone. And in the state legislature, and he's a former governor, so you know he gets a lot of special perks and accommodations. But when the leadership and Annette will tell you this, Assembly McKeon will tell you this, when they see Jim McCreevy in the State House, walking down the hall, they go, and no one, particularly Governor Murphy, our Senate President Terry, our Speaker Coughlin, none of them will ever say no to the efforts of the New Jersey Reentry. Congratulations. Special person. And I just had a deja vu that when folks were coming home, the challenge was a place to live. And I think that Jim has contributed to the conversation big time of programs for us to provide housing. And I think you're going to see that explode big time. And I can remember him fighting in Trenton to get regulations changed so some of our houses of worship could open their doors and temporarily house people. So I want to thank Jim and the faith community.